Good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to welcome you to another edition of the NSCAC Presents Behind the Bench. My name is Valerio Rocca. I'll be the host today. I'm the Vice President of the NSCAC. And today with us, we have a special guest, William Eskay, who is the current captain of the St. Louis Ambush of the MASL and is a member of the U.S. Men's Futsal National Team. William, welcome. It's a pleasure to have you.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here. I'm excited.
So our topic today is career paths for soccer players outside of the mainstream 11v11 game. I think it's an interesting topic because I think when people talk about the beautiful game in soccer, they talk about the 11v11 format. I think there's a lot more other avenues out there. And I think the game is constantly evolving, and there's a lot of fun, exciting, small-sided games out there that both female and male players can be a part of. So William, why don't you take us a little bit about your past and a little bit about your journey?
Sure. So I grew up in Maryland. Frederick, Maryland is a small county in Western Maryland, near Washington, D.C. And my dad owns a soccer club out there. It's a nonprofit, so he's the executive director or whatever that title is. And I grew up and played in my hometown kind of my whole youth career. At high school age, I played high school soccer and then did club half the year, and I did a lot of ODP growing up. I'm not sure about the landscape of Canada. Do you guys do ODP here there as well?
We have that somewhat, yes.
Um, so when I was growing up before the academy program was being brought up in the US, that was where most players collected to do kind of select teams, and you had your state team, and then there's a regional team, which is like there's four regions over the US, kind of northeast, southeast, west, and midwest. And then that was really the pathway to the national team when I was a youth player. So you would play ODP, make your state team, and kind of move up the ranks, play tournaments and stuff like that. And so I did that, played on the Region 1 team, which is all the Northeast players, and kind of through high school. When I was 16 or 17, I went on some trials and was in the pool with the men's national team. I was kind of caught that right at the tail end. They kind of do 15 to 17-year-olds, and I got in right kind of when I was 17. From there, so I had a super successful high school career when I was playing. I'm all-time leading point scorer, goal scorer, assists at my high school, and then I think I maybe lost 2 games or something, but we went 20-0 and won the state championship my senior year. And I had a really great experience playing high school ball. I know now that's at least in the US, it's a big decision families make if they want to play in the academy system or play high school soccer. I had a great experience there. And so after high school, I played at the College of William and Mary. I have a big family history there. It's a Division I school in Williamsburg, Virginia. They would float kind of being a top 25 team to like a top 70 team. So when you're there, how it usually goes, we made the tournament 1 year out of our 4 years, won our conference, and then went to the NCAA tournament. That's pretty common at William and Mary. Really good academic institution and a historic soccer program, but not comparable. It's not like an ACC school or something like that. They're not in the tournament every year. But so I had a good career there. Started all 76 games of my career since freshman year. Was very fortunate to have any injuries. So every game of every year I was starting and playing. And then when I graduated, this is what pushed me into the smaller sided space, which is kind of why we're here. Most of the if you don't get drafted into the MLS right out of college, and that ends in the fall, if you do your spring semester, it's not the time that teams are looking to pick up players. So you get a lot of lost players, and it was the time that they were picking up indoor players, and I got connected with a guy named Pat Healy for the Harrisburg Heat. And that's actually where Christian Pulisic's dad played for the Harrisburg Heat. They rep that line. You'll see there's some pictures of him wearing Harrisburg Heat hats, which is kind of funny. And so I got involved in the indoor space there, which is kind of what led me to where I am now. Uh, I liked it, stuck with it. I didn't necessarily think I was going to play indoor all the time. I think I imagined I would be back outside playing 11 aside. It didn't really pan out that way for kind of a variety of reasons. One just being that the seasons have some overlap, and the timing wasn't super great when you're playing indoor to hop back at an outdoor season. Uh, but anyways, went through that, went well. Kind of each year was incrementally better, and so by my third year in the league or so, I was making bigger moves around the league, and I came out to St. Louis. 3 years here, I've been like MVP, most goals on the team, and sort of getting some more league recognition. And this last year was my best season ever, and that was what kind of had me identified for the men's futsal national team, which I would describe as sort of the peak of my playing career so far, for sure. Highest level, most competition and responsibility, and definitely for me, most meaningful playing I've ever done was playing within that futsal national team group. So that's where I'm at now. Is that a pretty good breakdown for you?
Yeah, very good. Thank you. What would you say some of the different skill sets needed to play in your league versus the 11v11 game?
Yeah, there's a lot of different answers I could say here. Generally speaking, if you're a very good 11v11 player, you can play at a small sided game, although it's not going to come naturally to you. You'll have to change some habits you have when you're playing small sided to be good at it. So there's kind of like a 2 year, from what I see, it takes most players about 2 years to build the natural instincts that sort of help you in a smaller sided. And that's more things like man-to-man defense. Sometimes you play man-to-man defense, which is very foreign for an outdoor player. Unless you're marking in a corner on a corner kick or something, you're almost never man-to-man. Part of the reason for that is you're always so close to the goal that it's almost like you're in a corner kick situation or an inside the box situation when you do start to get tight to your man. And any kind of extra space you're giving a guy, they're just going to shoot and score on you immediately. So the defensive piece is really important for players. I would say it's a much more mental game overall. Guys that struggle in the indoor game are super fast wingers that their play style is you hit it over the back line. I'm just going to run and get to it, and we'll make something happen from there. That kind of skill set isn't as useful. It's much more thoughtful in your passing and your actions. So guys that have a lot of success are like guys that play the number 10. Outside backs actually seem to transition well. And then the other spot that's sort of very effective where the skill sets transition is just like a true number 9. In futsal, it's a pivot, and indoor we call it a target player. But just being able to be an outlet for your team and the ability to hold the ball for a long period of time while guys are making creative runs around you is a very good way to generate shots and goal scoring chances around the box. And certainly, and everyone probably knows this, it's more technically focused. So the better your feet are, the softer they are. It's a tighter space. That's helpful. I would say it's not as important as how quickly you can think when you're playing. Thinking quickly is more important than having the soft feet, but it's definitely a requirement.
Would you say the thinking aspect, your soccer IQ, how quickly you can process information, how quickly you can solve problems, would probably be one of the highest skill sets you would need to be successful in the small-sided games?
Without a doubt, without a doubt. And the nice thing about that is, of all the things, it's something you can acquire when you're 20. The other stuff, you either have it or you don't by the time you're 20. That sort of thing you can still develop, which is why it presents itself as a decent opportunity for players who haven't caught their break on the 11 side game, because there's still room to grow in that aspect of their game.
I don't know how familiar you are with the Canadian system, but right now in youth sports, there's a lot of emphasis on small-sided at the younger ages. So we have a game model from U8 to U12, or as the ages start to go as you start to get older, they start adding more and more players on the field, and they start to increase the amount of space that a player has on the field to eventually get to the 11v11 game. What are your thoughts on small sided games in terms of player development at a younger age?
Yeah, I would say absolutely critical. I would say that before I started playing the small sided as an older player, I played a lot of futsal growing up, but absolutely critical. And there's a couple of things that factor in it. The basic baseline that everyone will go to is you get more touches, which is true, right? If you're playing 11 aside, everyone knows the stat. There's some like you have the ball for 2 minutes total a game or 2.5 minutes. Um, and over time for a young player, if you're training, let's say at the highest level, you're training like 4 times a week with a game at the weekend when you're super young. Uh, Getting 50% more touches every single day for 3 years adds up and has a huge impact. Just on your general technical ability. You're more involved and you're doing more things. I think the larger piece that maybe at least in US soccer that gets missed is there's a huge benefit to understanding the space with 4 players, meaning most situations you get in 4 or 5 players, let's say, if you're playing futsal indoor, but most situations you get in a game, there's 11 people on your team, but you're not interacting with 11 players. A center back's generally working with their center mid, their outside back, their goalkeeper, and their other center back. It's a diamond shape. They're the fifth guy. And so what happens at a young age when you add too many players on the field is you're asking a player to understand the spacing of an 11-a-side game with 11 players, but they haven't yet even got the building block of understanding just their role within the 3 or 4 guys that are around them on the field. And so basically they sort of get pushed up the development ladder too quickly. And I think that's why you see countries with a very large futsal culture, like Brazil, or Argentina, or Spain or Portugal, and now actually Japan, which is very interesting because they just started their futsal culture and they are now having a lot of success internationally. Those players seem to be able to make really good decisions in critical moments in tight spaces, whether that's defensively around their box or creating chances on the offensive side. And so, yeah, I think the mental side of playing 4v4 or 5v5 gives these players more soccer interactions. That is just what you really need as a baseline to bring with you as you start to understand the space on a bigger field. And I think that's probably the biggest benefit to it is really getting a strong foundation of how to make decisions with that four or five guys.
Yeah, I would have to agree with you. I think to digging deeper and move. I think to dig in deeper, you first have to understand how a child or young player learns
Hmm.
to create that environment where they could be successful. And if you look at younger kids, they don't really have a sense of sharing with others. It's all about them and the ball, right? And now to go make them play with 10 other people on a field, well, it's not going to happen successfully. But with a smaller amount of players, you can focus more on, hey, you've got 3 other teammates. Learn how to play with them and how to share that ball with
Yeah, no, I would absolutely agree with that. I mean, it's easier to understand how to play 1v1 than it is how to play 2v2. And so give them a chance to learn that first. I mean, and yeah, right. Then you can move on with what do you do if it's 2v2 and all of a sudden both defenders are marking you? Is that a good time to pass? Situations like that show up much more clearly with smaller numbers. It's very confusing when there's an extra 8 guys around you.
them. Yeah. Do you find that the transition from smaller to bigger and vice versa, which one would you find is easier and why?
Um, So this maybe isn't the answer you're quite looking for, but it's probably harder to go. For most players, it's going to be harder to go from an indoor or a smaller sided to. I'm talking. Are you talking asking for like pro or players like 20 plus kind of years old? Or are you talking about for younger guys?
That's that's a good question. Let's divide it into two. Let's look first at the younger player, and then let's look at the pro level.
Okay. So for a younger player, no, I don't think so because I think transitioning from a small space to a bigger space is easier, and you see it happen, and you see players get confused when they start playing 6v6 and 9v9. They don't know sometimes what to do right away. But it kind of goes back to the point I made earlier, where if they know kind of the fundamental decision making pieces, things don't change. If there's three guys around you and there's two guys pressuring, you can make a choice here. Now they start to learn broader positioning responsibilities, meaning generally when you're a center back, it's like this part of the field really just can't go in ever because it leaves the hole, it's too big of a hole for us, right? Uh, that's pretty easy for players to pick up. You could tell someone who's never played soccer that, and they'll remember it forever, So that's not a difficult thing to pick up. The harder piece for sure would be explaining, to a guy who's only ever played striker on an 11 side field, how to defend 1v1 and where you need to be standing, stuff, things like that. So I think at a younger age, moving up is definitely easier. It'd be an interesting experiment to take kids and play them 11 aside for 5 years, and take kids and play them 4 aside and flip them and see how it goes. Then on the pro level, I think it comes down to more of an athleticism piece. Generally, there's just a certain athletic requirement if you're talking about professional players in an outdoor game, uh, that isn't the same in an indoor game. You don't have to have the same amount of. I mean, and speed is the most time for most people. It's a determining factor. Uh, Guys on 11 side field are just going to be so much faster, probably bigger, stronger, better athletes generally. But as long as you're fast, you can usually hold your own. Indoor players can slow down a bit because there's not the same amount of opportunities to get exposed 1v1 with a lot of space. So you always have guys near you. And I think pro outdoor guys can learn the game. Again, I would say it takes about 2 years for guys to really get it. And indoor players know the outdoor game. It's usually athletically is their problem. I don't actually share that issue. My biggest strength was just that I was super, super fast. So that's why I say that, because that's the difference I noticed from me to most indoor players, is I have that extra gear athletically. So yeah, that's what I would say for the older groups.
Yeah, I'm a big proponent of small-sided games, especially at the younger ages, because of all the points that you touched on, right? The speed of play increases. Your decision making has to be extremely high. I find that a lot of younger players nowadays are shutting off mentally when the ball's not in their area of the field, and in a small-sided game, you'll get exposed tremendously if you keep shutting off your brain like that. That's why it's good, I think, for that piece that at the young ages we're giving them that exposure to that small sided game as much as we can to sharpen up everything that they'll need for the bigger picture long term.
Yeah, actually, there's one thing you said in there that I typically is something I agree with, which is the getting exposed on mistakes. It's much better for a player to make a mistake and just get scored on. They learn quickly than it is for a coach to yell at them and say you didn't do the right thing. Because they're not going to understand why that's wrong when the winger makes a bad choice because they didn't get scored on. They're still playing. It's unclear what exactly the problem is. They might even disagree with their coach. If you lose the ball and immediately get scored on, they go, okay, that was a wrong move by me, and they can learn on their own much quicker.
Yeah, absolutely. For anybody that has any questions, feel free to ask them in the chat, and we'll periodically review them and ask them to William. So if you have any questions, any comments, please go ahead and just put them in the chat for us. Um, the indoor game in the States is not really well known here in Canada. I've watched a few games. I think it was a lot of high entertainment and a lot of good quality soccer. Can you go over some of the rules and some of the philosophies at that indoor game right now in the MASL?
Yeah. Actually, they're no longer a part of the league, but when I first started, there was a team in Mississauga,
Yeah,
um, that I played against, and they had what's his name? De Rosario, MLS MVP guy.
yeah, he was part of
Was
it.
He was playing for them, and he did an all right job. He wasn't dominant like you might go, hey, this is an MVP. What I don't think it was an MVP, maybe an all-star, MLS all-star. Really good player. You would think he might dominate there, and he did solid. He was a good player, but by no means was controlling the game. But yeah, in the indoor game is interesting because it to me feels like an Americanized version of soccer, like more catered towards the like a hockey, uh, football, basketball kind of entertainment value. It certainly feels Americanized in that regard. Um, I think the real reason it's still around is because there's just a really big history with it. For a while, it was the only professional league, uh, and so those those teams were packing arenas to the max, getting 10,000 plus fans every single game, and that was the only soccer. And so I think that's why it's successful now. Is there's a lot of people for a while that was how they watch soccer, and so they're still interested. Um, And then if you go to a game, they're definitely exciting. And they're really exciting to watch. It doesn't quite look like soccer people are used to for sure, but they're enjoyable. The biggest differences rule wise, futsal rules. There's not a ton of differences there. They're very similar to futsal rules, but one being like, okay, if it goes out of bounds for a goal kick, it's in the keeper's hands. He can roll it out, throw it out. Once the keeper plays it once in a possession, you can't play it back to him. And that rule is flipped back and forth. That comes from futsal. Um, the current rule is you can't play it back to him. So once he gives you the ball, you're forced to uh, play out of the back in a numbers even scenario, right? Which is actually a lot harder than you think it is. Normally when you play out of the back, you have at least two more guys than they do when they're pressing you. So that creates a lot of chaos, makes it fun to watch, but also the best teams do that stuff very well. They can break out of the back numbers even. There's three lines that split the field, similar to the hockey lines, and the rule is you can't hit it from your defending third in the air to the other team's third. So that's if it crosses all three of those lines in the air, ball gets brought back to your yellow line, the other team gets a free kick, and they can, it's not a huge goal scoring opportunity, but teams score on it, and it's definitely a momentum shift. And the idea there being you can't just clear the ball out. And then the other rule kind of near that about clearing the ball is if you clear it out of bounds in your defensive third, they get what's called a top of the box free kick, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's a really dangerous. A lot of goals are scored on it. It's a free kick right on top of the small goalie box that's in the indoor game. Okay, I guess the other important rule I'm missing for sure is you can sub on the fly. So it's exactly like hockey, although the shifts are probably even shorter. Guys are typically on the field for a minute, 30 seconds maybe, and then they're off the field. And that happens on the fly. If you mess it up and there's too many guys on the field, then the next important one that I'm missing is you can get blue cards. So there's penalty minutes. You can play a man down for bad fouls, bad subs, like keeper handballing it outside the box will get you a blue card. And so we have power plays, and that is another time that teams score lots and lots of goals. That's about it, I think, for rules that are totally foreign to the outdoor game that are in the indoor game.
What are typical scores like in games?
Uh, depends on team style and a bit on the arena. So there's some generally I think if you see a 6-4 game, you would say that's like a normal score. But there's some exceptions. There's a range of size for the arena you can have. And typically the smaller the arena, the more goals. And so there's a couple teams that have very small arenas. Those games can be like 15 and 10 or something. It's pretty wild to play there. Not actually my favorite places to play. but that's pretty common. And then there's you'll see a 2-1 game every now and then too. If especially in bigger games when teams are trying to be very careful and sort of methodical about when they give the ball away, you can see some low scoring games like a 2-1. That's not super common, but it happens probably 20% of the games. And then you almost never see a shutout. If you get shut out by a team, that's a slap in the face. Scoring 0 goals in a game is very, very rare. And so that has happened to me a few times. It's not fun.
We have a couple questions, William. One is we're discussing alternate career paths for the 11v11 at the pro level. Would you be able to comment on what salary ranges are for futsal players in the US as well as in the arena soccer version of the league?
Yeah, so there's no professional futsal league in the US. The salary range in the MASL, I would say resembles a lot of the contracts in the USL, which is our second division here, in terms of a monthly basis. So we play 6 months out of the year, and for the most part, your contract, you're getting paid 6 months out of the year. Now the monthly salary you're getting is typically higher than the average USL player, from what I can tell, but it is only 6 months instead of 10 months. So if you're trying to calculate how much you're making yearly, it's going to be a little less. I've seen a full-blown range. So I think well-established guys are comfortably living off of their MASL contracts, and then very new players, there's players that get only paid if they make the roster. That kind of varies team to team. And so it's hard for me to comment on kind of like the average like rookie contract, because I've seen like a per game, and I've seen rookie contracts where maybe someone's making $1,200 a month and they get a house to live in and food covered and things like that. So nobody's getting rich at first, that's for sure. No one's getting rich at all, but players at first, if you had a bunch of student debt or something, would have a hard time being a rookie in the league. So that's something to consider, because what happens is the traditional college or player path is either you are going pro overseas. Very unlikely you're going homegrown in the MLS before college, and so you're probably going to college, and so you have to try to gauge whether it's worth it to get into student debt and what that can impact on your soccer playing career after college. If you have to pay that back on a rookie contract, it's difficult for sure.
Do you find that a lot of players are using the arena soccer version as a stepping stone to the 11v11 game out of college? Or are the majority of them come to the realization that they won't be playing 11v11 and this is now their new career path?
It's infrequent that it's a stepping stone. Typically what happens is it's much more frequent that guys do both, that they play outdoor in the second division and then play indoor, and you can kind of do both. The outdoor season starts in January and then ends sometime in the fall, and then the indoor season runs from November to like April. So there's some overlap on the tail end of the indoor season, but a lot of guys I've known have done both. Yeah, it's infrequent for it to be a stepping stone. Part of that is, I think, just how those second division, because that would be the next step up, is playing in the USL. Part of it is how those coaches and organizations, I think, just view players. Actually, I got caught off guard. It was almost like I had a stamp on my resume, like a red stamp that said like, no, thank you, after I started playing indoor. I was in the MLS draft. I did get drafted, but typically for that kind of player, USL teams are happy to pick you up absolutely if you're in the draft, and a top college player. But once I played indoor for like 3 or 4 months, I found it much harder to get on an outdoor roster, which was interesting to me. I didn't know that was the case.
Why is that?
I don't know. I think it's a lack of knowledge. I don't know if you tuned into the 7-a-side tournament at all, that happened in the US this summer. So it's called the soccer tournament. But it was outdoor. It was 7 sides. It's still smaller, but bigger than the indoor field. And every team was comprised. It was kind of there were some very big names playing in the tournament. In terms of clubs, there West Ham was there, Dortmund was there, Wrexham was there, some second division Italian teams, and there were some big US teams as well. And they all had very big outdoor soccer names. Usually guys that just finished the MLS. Some teams brought their kind of youth, like under 20 players. Certainly thinking that they were going to just kind of wipe the floor. And I was in the tournament with an all indoor team, and it was really a pretty smooth path for us. Actually, we played a Canadian team in the final, and they were an indoor futsal club. I wish I knew the club that it was. I think it was like SLF something in Canada, but maybe an indoor and futsal club there. But I think it was a wake-up call for outdoor teams that, oh, these guys are actually good players. Because it wasn't really close for most of the guys we were playing. It was a bunch of outdoor players that weren't used to a slightly smaller space, and we had maybe one hard game and kind of walked through the rest of them. So it may just be a lack of knowledge, or I don't know, have the answer for why they're not interested in it, but I haven't seen it be a stepping stone.
You guys won that tournament, correct? The 7v7. Wasn't that coach? Weren't you guys coached by Sean Green?
Yes. He was not our head coach, but our head coach was coached by Sean Green. So Sean was around all the time. He was like the assistant coach, media guy. Loved him. Was a great guy.
Do you regret not going the USL route that maybe could have springboarded you going into the MLS?
There's a piece of that. Like, before I started playing for the men's national team, there was a piece of that. I mean, my career in the indoor game has been excellent. So there's no telling if I would have had a worse career in the USL. Now, I certainly thought when I went in, I was going to be one of those players. There's groups of players in the USL that have a chance of getting a couple looks in the MLS. That's where I thought I was. And for a while, certainly I was regretted doing the indoor stuff. Where I'm at now, I don't think that's the case anymore. I mean, I don't think be a very long, unlikely shot for me to get on the men's national team. But to get on the futsal national team, which, futsal kind of worldwide, I think has a lot of respect. And so playing in that group was awesome. Like I wouldn't change my path at all, because that getting the chance to represent your country at all, put the uniform on, like, I'll take that. And I definitely don't regret getting put on a path that led me there.
Let's just say there was a player in your league or yourself that the MLS wanted. Does it work like it usually works around the world, where there's a transfer fee and everything like that, or are they independent and you kind of just can break your contract and go to the MLS?
You could break your contract for
You
sure.
can break.
They're not their governing body is not FIFA. So you would be fine for sure.
Who's their governing body?
It's a good question. I don't know the answer. I know it's not FIFA, because when I was starting, I was worried about that with USL contracts, how I was going to manage that. But they're two different governing bodies, so you just can't play for other indoor teams. They can control you within their realm, but outside of that, they don't really have control over you.
So is there a collective bargaining agreement then that you guys have, or you guys are all independent?
Yeah, there's no player union. There's no bargaining agreement. Yeah, you're on your own for sure. And that was a learning experience too. I'm a pretty good negotiator these days.
So basically, if you don't have a good business sense and a good playing sense, you can really struggle financially and success and professionally in this kind of a league.
Yeah, there's some truth to that. The only thing I would say that's sort of counter to that is it's only 6 months, and there's definitely time to manage careers. I have a lot of I have a good buddy on my team here who does software stuff, and he works totally remotely. And you know, training takes a lot out of you, but it's maybe 3 hours every day, 3.5, 4 hours a day. And so you can manage, you're really busy over the season during the season, but you can manage getting your full-time job and remotely. You know, you might work, we train super early, so you might work from 10:30 to 6:30 or whatever, and you can get your full-time job in. And then in the off season, you can sort of dive all the way back in. So it's pretty easy to manage a professional career in on a more business related sense and the soccer stuff. And that's what most guys do. Um, which is actually in a lot of sense better than playing in the second division outdoor, because it's 10 months of your life, and it's harder to manage, you know, a coaching job, or you like doing private training sessions or whatever it is. So yeah, I would say that guys figure out a way to manage, but if you just played soccer and you're not a big name in the league, then you're certainly watching your budget.
Have you considered playing in a futsal pro league in another country?
I would love that. I like playing futsal way more than indoor. I don't think if you're doing a pros and cons, there would be any way to justify it in terms of uh what I think the value of living in the US is. Also, I just got married, and I have a house out here in St. Louis, and so that is not feasible currently where I am in my life. We actually have, it's really common to have pro futsal players come play in the MASL, because it's kind of their ticket to the US, and they find it much easier to build the rest of their life here other than just the soccer side. So I think it would be hard for me to justify doing that, although I would love to play professional futsal in one of the leagues in Europe, at least for a small period of time, just to try it. That'd be awesome.
I know you took one of the golden scoring course by John De Benedictis. How did that course help you help shape your success today?
Yeah, I was hoping we would talk about it. Because it actually is really astonishing the level of improvement you can see after a week of doing it. I'm not over exaggerating that, particularly with me. Technically finishing wise, like, can I curve a ball? Can I strike one well? Can I place it where I wanted to? It was never an issue for me. But I've gone through bouts where I've definitely struggled finishing. Um, and so there's a huge mental side to the finishing game, which is like where the benefit of John's course comes in. And I still remember those things and still use them. And I run a once a week extra like finishing school for the club I do out here. And I read John's book, and I try to incorporate as much as I can into it, because I'm like, I know this to be true and I know it works. So I try to deliver that message around as much as I can. That the year that I took it was before my senior year of high school, and I scored 29 goals that season. There's just a certain confidence that comes with knowing you're making the right choice when you're trying to finish. And that way, when you miss, there's no spiral. You go, no, that was the right call. I didn't score that one, but that was the right call to make. And so there's something about that confidence that helps you. I'd actually like to do it again. I might have to bring John out of St. Louis. And the other thing for John, I would love to see, is if he could redo the statistics for indoor and futsal. I'd be curious if the same applies, because there's some differences I've noticed that I've had to change a little. So I'd love to see a different set of stats and see what the conclusions came out with the smaller goal and tighter spaces and things like that.
I'm sure it's on his list that we can get him to do that. Having said that, I know you have some videos of some of your some highlights. You want to
Sure,
share it
sure.
with everybody there?
Yeah, let's do it.
I think I've made you a co-host, so you're able to share your screen.
Okay. All right. These will be some cool clips, I think. Is that up there?
No, I don't see it.
My screen's not sharing.
Yeah,
Mine, it looks.
Yeah, there it is. I can see it now.
Okay. So these next three clips are all from the same game. There's a couple of interesting things that all happen. I think this first one is a classic futsal indoor goal. And I'll describe it a little before I play, but when I played into the big target up top, you'll see like a double movement. I run one way and very hard change directions, which opens up a little space for the target to roll me the ball, and then I sort of finish it high, even though John most of the time tells you to shoot low, but sometimes indoor you got to put it high and roof it. So here's the clip for you. There you go. And my announcer's notorious for screaming like that. So those are exciting goals. So we can watch that last part one more time, so you can try to catch the double movement. But this is really effective in generating space in tight spaces. So there you go. There's one. This is the same game. This is actually an assist, but I put it in here to show the subbing on the fly rule. This team subs on the fly and they do a bad job, and so you'll sort of see what can happen when you do that. So they have one guy off the field right now because they didn't sub properly. That's a Brazilian professional futsal in Brazil. He's a really, really good finisher, but you see they subbed the wrong time, leave some space open for him, and he sort of puts that away. All right, two more for you. And this one's more of an individual effort that you'll never see in anything other than indoor because it goes off the boards a couple times, but you'll like this. And so that's 7-4. I think that game ended 8-4. That's a pretty common score there. Last one. This is probably my best goal of the year last year. I think it was up for contender of goal of the year. They show a replay here. So there you go. That's the MASL for you.
It's interesting. Interesting. We have a two-part question. One, did your family play a role in your success? And if they did, I'm not going to assume that they did, but if they did, how did they?
Yeah. I gotta believe most people's answer is yes to that one. So I'm one of 5 siblings. I have 2 brothers. That is, I think, critical. I don't know about critical, but very helpful if you have someone you can play against all the time. So we're always playing in the backyard. That's useful. And then my dad, he actually played in the indoor league after his college career, team called the Arizona Sand Sharks. But he was super invested in soccer. Kind of always has been. And all 5 of the siblings in my family, so 2 sisters and 2 brothers, then me, we're all college soccer players, all Division I except my oldest sister, who was a Division III soccer player. That was just kind of our life. It was like you go to school, then you go to soccer practice. That's what you do. And I don't know if we all had much of a choice in the matter, but I think I'm glad that I didn't. I definitely value the commitment that my dad or parents sort of sorry, I just got a text from my dad, who I guess is in the webinar.
Yes, I think he's the one asking these questions.
That's incredible. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. So my dad gave was very much pushed us to soccer, and my mom gave us all the athleticism. So that was a bit of a dual combo there.
So his second part was, and I think I'll remove him from the discussion before you answer, just in case it doesn't go the way he wanted it. But was your father or your mother a larger influence?
Yeah, yeah. Like I said, he made sure we were at practice, and my mom gave us all the genes we needed to be good.
They each played their own role in getting you where you are.
Yeah,
Um,
there you go.
we have another question. Can you tell us the name of the course that you spoke about earlier? I think
You can know the exact name better than me. The
I
golden
think it's
scoring
yeah,
course.
it's the goal scoring course. It's run by John Benedictus, and it's the goal scoring course. If you go to the NSCAC website, I believe it's on there, that information. So I think we should start wrapping up, William. I think it's been a great discussion. We've got some coaches on here. We've got some parents on here. So I think I'd like to end off with two questions for you. One, what would be, in terms of the smaller sided games and the pathway to the smaller sided games, what would be your advice to those athletes that have aspirations of playing pro soccer?
Yeah. So it's a bit of a sad story for the indoor futsal space a little bit, but my now former national team coach for the futsal team, his one of his biggest goals was generating that ultimate pathway for players right at that 20-year-old age. You basically can go to college and play soccer, and that's it. Maybe you get drafted. Most guys don't, and it's really unclear what you can do from there. I would say the indoor league is growing a lot. If you want to try a different type of soccer and you'd like to continue playing, there's an MASL combine every single year. Teams draft about 3 players from it that get picked up every year, and the league is growing fast and looking to pick up new guys. And I think the biggest reason players don't that want to play don't find a spot is because they don't know where to go. There's not a USL team in their town or things like that. It's actually them just not knowing where to go. And then the second piece of advice I would give is just be persistent. If there's one thing to someone's success that I think trumps all the other ones, is guys get discouraged very easily if they want to stay on the pro path. And the guys that I know that and some have gone to become really, really good players. Our national team goalkeeper is a great example of this, who just went into the USL and is very unskilled when he started. But if you just give yourself some time and stick around and just say, I'm going to do this for this amount of time, no matter what, and be persistent and active in your search and staying fit, that's like the number one tool that you'll have. Because most guys will get discouraged and they'll just give up. And a week or a month of trials, it's not really enough time. Maybe you get lucky, but you need to stay on the ball and really just keep going for it until it works out. And if it's never going to work out, you'll figure that out. If you want to go for it and it's never going to work out because you just don't have it, you'll figure that out eventually. And I would give yourself, I think a year is a good timeline. A full year of having one goal, I think, is a good timeline to try to do that.
Before I ask my last question, there's another question in the chat. There's no pro futsal league in the US. Where do the top players play, and how do they get selected for the national futsal team?
Yeah, so for the futsal national team, there are players that play in Europe that have US passports. There's a few of those guys that play for the futsal national team. There is one player that lives in Dallas that played in the Futsal Champions League that moved to Dallas and then started playing the MASL, and they sort of saw his resume and did that. And then the majority of the other guys are indoor players, which is a bit of a disadvantage the national team has, is all of our players are playing indoor most of the year. And I would say that comprises maybe 65, 70% of the roster is indoor players playing futsal.
My last question is then, so we've talked about your advice for younger players. What would be your advice to coaches who have players that have a that have a desire and ambition to want to play pro?
Yeah, so I go back and forth on this depending on the player or the type of person they are. And this is something that they have to decide with their parents. But I think if there's nothing you want to do other than play pro, I think you should look for professional avenues before you go to college. Clubs would way rather have a 16-year-old, 17-year-old with high potential than 21-year-old with has some potential. And so if you really want to do that, and you can go to college if you decide to stop playing. If you want to play from 17 to 20, 22, you might not be able to play college soccer, but I'm assuming if you're giving up on your professional soccer career, that maybe then playing college soccer isn't a huge deal for you, and you can still go to college and get a degree and be and do well there. Yeah, I think coaches that really have young guys that they think are there, try to get them connected with someone that knows more than you about about where they can play. Having a good agent is super helpful. If you can get on a club in Europe, it's much easier to come back to the US and play pro from a club in Europe. That looks way better. And young players have to be willing to take some risks and leave home if they want to go play somewhere. I mean, it's very unlikely that you're going to be the hometown hero and grow up and play for the MLS team that's near you or whatever it is. I think you have to take some risks and go play other places, and get out of your comfort zone, to sort of get to that next tier. I mean, I think if you look at our national team players of the US, I think that's the pathway for all of them.
I think it's also being realistic with yourself, right? Not everybody's going to play for Man United and Juventus and Barcelona. So it's about, like you said, finding a good agent who's going to represent you well and put you in an environment where you're going to be able to achieve your professional ambitions, but also be successful with your game as well.
Yeah, and good agent is important. There's a lot of not good agents out there. So you have to be very realistic when someone's telling you something to make sure they're not selling you snake oil and that they're actually there to help you. It's best to go through people use connections you have, coaches with good reputations. That way the person that's working with you will care about you. And I think that's the way to do it. So don't just go on Google and look up an agent. Find a good pathway to someone that has a good reputation and is trusted.
Yeah, ask the right questions, right? Who are your clients? What have you done with them? Who are your connections, right? I think some of these guys are taking a fee up front, which, from what I've been told, is you should try to stay away from these kind of agents.
Absolutely.
Right? An agent.
What are you paying them for?
That's right. An agent will work for free right off the bat for you and work for you to get that contract.
Yeah, especially if they think you're good, because that if they think you can get a contract, that's the only reason they should represent you.
Yeah. Good point. So before we wrap up, we have a special offer. So the team that William's currently on, the St. Louis Ambush, has donated a jersey for us. It's one of their new jerseys. So the NSCAC is going to be giving out a St. Louis Ambush jersey. The contest is you have to go and visit our Instagram page at NSCAC. You have to follow us. You have to tag 3 people. And there's the upcoming Jamaica versus Canada game on November 17th. You have to pick the correct score, and whoever does all those 3 things will get a new St. Louis Ambush jersey. And maybe if William is nice enough, we can have him sign it for you and frame it for you. So If you want that jersey, go follow us. William, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much. Good luck with the rest of your journey, and we look forward to watching you more now that we have a better idea of the indoor game in the States. And we'll talk to you soon.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate it. I had a lot of fun.
Thank you very much. Take care.